Welcome to the Small Giants Fishbowl. This topic is how to build your leadership bench. Join Paul Dreyer, Chief Empowerment Officer at Avid4 Adventure, to learn how this outdoor adventure company maintains healthy, intentional growth by developing an active pipeline of future leaders. Okay, here we go.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hamza. And thanks for everyone being here. I did want to do one more plug, just what Hamza said. If you're decent and can turn on your video, I personally would love to see you. So if that makes sense for you. I wanted to start with actually a quick story from earlier on in my week. On Monday of this week, I was a participant on a webinar. And this is our webinar, like this one is as well. And I signed on, and the presenter, who is a great presenter, I know well, I've known well for many years. The topic was something I was really interested in, and then this is how my hour played out on Monday during that webinar. The presenter immediately clicked into a PowerPoint. And then I think the PowerPoint presentation was 30 or 40 slides. And over that hour, I ended up checking my email a bunch. And I think I took a phone call during the webinar at one point, and multitasked throughout the whole thing, and maybe heard about a third of it. And I know folks in this room right now, we're a very similar community, and we're all peers. So my guess is that story is pretty similar story that you all have experienced countless times with so many webinars that we engage with these days. I wanted to start with that story because the next 45 minutes or so that I'll keep you, 45 to 50 minutes, I hope to be just a little bit different. I don't have a long PowerPoint. I will do some sharing of my screen, and I have a couple of slides to show that are mostly just fun pictures. So that's something that you should not expect. One thing, an expectation that you should expect over the next 45 minutes or so is, as Hamza alluded to, hopefully a bunch of interaction. I'm going to ask you all every 8 or 10 minutes, every 8 or 10 minutes throughout the next 40 minutes, to do something, to actually think about something. And so you should have a pen and paper ready, or if you jot notes on some sort of tablet or phone or device. But I wanted to set those expectations that I want this to be participatory and interaction, and understanding that is probably not the norm from many webinars that you've been on. So no harm, no foul. Like you should leave now. If that's not something that you want, if you don't want to be in participation and interaction. I very purposely say every 8 to 10 minutes or so. I do like to geek out on educational theory every now and then, and people say that now, the current research right now, it doesn't matter what age you are or who you are, our current attention spans are about 8 to 10 minutes. So every 8 to 10 minutes, we should do something. We should pivot the conversation a little bit. If you are leading a meeting or leading a training or something like that, I would keep that in mind. All right, with that, I just said I wasn't going to show a PowerPoint, or I'm actually going to share my screen and start with just a few slides just to begin an intro. And I'll share my screen here now. As Hamza was saying, please do use the chat feature below. If at any point technology is failing, or you have a question, or you can't see what I'm showing, or screen share is failing, just throw a chat in there, and Hamza will keep me honest on things and speak up if I need to change anything. So this is a presentation on building your bench and building our bench. I'm going to talk about just one aspect of how we are developing an active pipeline of future leaders, and we'll talk at length about our 3-year staffing plan that we've used at Avid4 Adventure. But this is just one aspect of how we develop leaders. This is how we'll play out the next 45 minutes or so. I'll do a little introductions of who I am and what we do at Avid4 Adventure, just to set the context a little bit. We'll talk about the why. I will completely convince you of the why of a 3-year staffing plan, of why it's such a great idea. And then you will say, okay, great, I'm in, but tell me how y'all did it. So we'll talk about the how. And then we'll talk about the hard things, the things that we're still struggling with our 3-year staffing plan. And then we'll end with looking to all of our future and how we can use all of this knowledge. So in introductions, and I will introduce myself and Avid, like I said, in a moment here. While I'm doing that, just for the benefit of everyone on the call, if everyone here could practice using that chat feature by just typing in your name and where you're coming from. So your company, maybe geographically where you're calling in right now, just so everybody on the call, including myself, can see where you all are at and who you are. So you can go ahead and do that now as I'm introducing myself. Caveat here, there's 3 pictures on your screen. None of these pictures are me. But to tell you, we'll use these 3 pictures to tell you a little intro of my journey and who I am. So who's Paul? I grew up very wonderful and stereotypical upbringing on the East Coast in New England, right? It's outside of Boston, and at great schooling, great community. I ended up doing my undergraduate work at the University of Michigan at their business school. So came out with a degree in finance and business. That first picture shows my first real job in the world of things was a financial analyst as a big corporate bank, wearing a suit to work every day. I did that for a pretty limited amount of time, and then realized that I really, really disliked that lifestyle. And then my story is I retired and I moved west. I moved to Utah, and then next picture in the middle of your screen is representation of me becoming a ski bum and moving to a mountain resort in Utah to really try to figure out the next step in my life and where my business and professional career would lead to. And lo and behold, it didn't really lead to a business lifestyle. And I've spent the next really 30 years, next 3 decades of my life since becoming that ski bum of doing pretty much everything and anything in the outdoor education and experiential education world of things. And that last picture there, while I have been a school teacher at varying times over those decades, really in my role at Avid4 Adventure as CEO and in other roles I've played, I see myself most importantly as somebody who empowers others and somebody who educates others. So sometimes I call myself a mercenary educator, and that's where we find ourselves here. I did want to make one quick correction from Hamza's intro of myself, that I have been around at Avid ever since we started 15 years ago, but I'm not Avid was founded by a close friend of mine, but I do serve as our CEO and leader of the organization currently. So that's a little bit about me, who we are at Avid4 Adventure. Fundamentally, our mission is to empower kids to lead active and healthy lifestyles in the outdoors. As I mentioned, we've been around for 15 years. We were founded in 2004, and we run summer day camps, summer resident overnight camps. We also lead expeditions for kids, school programs, and also special events for kids. And our core sports, which are paddling, and we get kiddos out rock climbing. We get kiddos out mountain biking on trails and in their neighborhoods. And our programs start at age 3 years old and go through teenage years. Again, day camps, overnight camps, and school programs. Just a few numbers, again, to set context for our conversation today. Currently, with our summer camps, we have 23 locations of summer camps, and that's across 3 states. And we've got there since 2004 by pretty consistently year over year, having 20 to 30% growth rate across all of our metrics, across revenue and locations, families, kids, and staff. And the last thing I'll say in intro to Avid here, and then we'll dive in, is this conversation today about building our bench and specifically about our 3-year staffing plan is about our staff. It's about our current staff and our future staff. And I'll talk more about the why here in a moment. But really, as we were growing 20 to 30% every year, we recognize that if we aren't proactive with building our pipeline from within, for future leaders, we would just not be able to keep up with our growth. Currently, this picture is here of a bunch of our seasonal staff. Currently, we have 23 full-time headquarters staff that work year-round for us, and we have 650 seasonal staff right now across those 3 states and all those camps. Those over 600 folks are really getting the job done at Avid across all of our programs. So I'm going to stop screen share here, so hopefully we can see back all of our faces and who's on the call here. This is the first moment of those 8 to 10 minutes. Well, I've been talking for about 10 minutes now, so I'm going to turn it back to you all for just 1 minute of interaction. I'm going to play some music while you all think about something and write something down. I'll give you a journal prompt. When the music ends, that's your cue to come back, and I'll continue the conversation with all of us. But your prompt right now in this first interaction moment is, I just told you a little bit about my professional journey. But what I want you to do right now, and if you can, jot down your first thoughts, just first thoughts on this, is think about your professional journey over the last 10 years, over the last 50 years, whatever your professional journey looks to you right now, and jot down 1 or 2 things that were hard for you along that journey, and 1 or 2 things along that journey where it just felt right for you, like the journey felt right. So something that was hard for you and something that felt right. I'll give you about a minute, and again, I'll play music while this happens, and then when the music ends, you can focus your attention back up to me. Let's try it out. All right. Through these different interactions, there'll be times where I'll ask you to share through the chat and times when I ask you to not. This first interaction, this was just for your personal benefit, right? To set some personal context for yourself. So just keep those notes to yourself for now. When I asked you those questions, I thought about those questions for myself as well. And things that came to mind for me for when all felt right, when it felt like I was really on that right journey, were things like clarity and somehow having a mentor or a guide, somebody that got to guide my way, and also having some sort of roadmap, right? So some sort of a roadmap into the future. And I am the outdoor guy, and I do also like to speak in analogies. So when I think about those things of like clarity and having a map or a guide, my analogy is being on the right journey is I've spent a lot of times in the backcountry on backpacking trips where I'm not on any trail. I'm just using a map and a compass to guide my way. And I feel amazingly right in those moments. And it doesn't have to, as long as I have the right tools and the right information, I don't need to be on a very distinct path. I don't need to be surrounded by others. I don't need to be following the path that other folks are typically on. I can still feel really right in my journey. And for me, that analogy of of having the appropriate map and having the appropriate tool is really helps guide my thinking on the why of this question of why develop a 3-year staffing plan. So I want to spend another just 5 minutes or so talking about our why at Avid4 Adventure, and then turn it back over to you all again. But when I think about the why of why we wanted to develop something like this, I think about our seasonal staff, those 650 staff that I mentioned. The number one question that I get from all of those staff are, wow, Avid4 Adventure, y'all are great. We love our work, but how can I get more? I want more. That's the number one question from our seasonal staff. And then on our headquarters staff, the 23 full-time folks that work year-round for us, the number one question I get from them, well, it's the same question. How do I get more, right? I want more responsibility. I want to see a pathway forward for me. So thinking about, like, I hear these questions all the time from all kinds of our staff. And then when we got together as headquarter team of saying, okay, if we developed something like this as a core leadership team, if we developed this, what would really be like our biggest reasons why? Sure, we want to satisfy those questions, but it came down to two things for us. Number one, as we grew, we wanted to and still want to hire internally as much as possible. And I hate to be, I know there's great people that work for tons of amazing companies that are not Avid4 Adventure, but if somebody can come and like the pictures I just showed you, if people can experience our culture from within, and you all have great cultures at your companies as well, I know that. That's why you're on this call. If someone can experience our culture and really be able to live our culture and understand it and be bought into the culture, and then an opportunity, a future professional opportunity opens up, I would always pick that internal candidate over an external candidate. And so we wanted to hire as internally as much as possible. And our second biggest reason why develop something like a 3-year staffing plan where we're able to predict out for the next 3 years different positions that will become available that people can angle themselves into. Our second reason was to tie that to budgeting, right? My guess is a lot of folks on the call right now pull out their hair every year with how to do their budgeting really well. And so much of our budgeting is tied to our payroll with most companies on the call, I'm sure. So if we could internally plan 3 years out of what positions were coming available, that's going to help us hire internally because people are going to see those positions coming. But it's going to help us on a budgeting standpoint understand how to budget this year for 3 years down the road for additional positions that we know are coming. So those are our two big whys: hiring internally and helping to tie to our future budgeting, not only for next year but for future years. So that's our why. I'm going to play some music here and again, and you all I'm going to ask you a question. And this one, when we come back, I'm actually going to ask you to do a little bit of sharing through the chat feature to get perspectives from everyone on this question. So just keep that in mind as I ask this question. So my question is, I just shared our why. What's your all's why of why, in addition to the two reasons that I just mentioned, why else would you be interested to develop a 3-year staffing plan where you can be transparent about showing possible opportunities that are coming? What's your why on why you think this is important and why you're here in this webinar? So again, I'll give you 1 minute. After the music stops, we'll come back and we'll do a little sharing through the chat. All right, everybody. As I mentioned, would love, again, if you feel comfortable doing so, throw into the chat right now one of your whys. Well, what's a why for you? And I think this will be informative for all of us on the screen. I want you to hear from us and our thoughts at Avid4 Adventure, but also from all of your great companies as well. So throw in your whys into the chat, and Hamza will monitor those and see if any questions come up. I did, before I move on to the how of how we ended up developing this and how it unfolded, I did want to also take some time right now to just see if there's any questions that if someone wanted to unmute themselves and actually verbally just ask me a question of, what do you mean about that why? Or I didn't understand why, or a question about the why. And again, another educational tip here, whenever I ask questions, I always give it at least 8 seconds of silence. So we will lean into some awkward silence here to see if there's any questions. And just so I'm understanding, Hamza, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I might have just misspoken. Like, I think you can unmute yourself, or you can just kind of give us a wave and we can unmute you as well. If at any point you have a question, I'll take questions throughout the presentation and also at the very end as well.
Exactly.
All right, let's thank you for so many folks for sharing your whys into the chat feature. And again, we will compile all those together and share back out to you. So let's move on to the how, right? So hopefully you're all saying, great, Paul, I'm in. This sounds like a great plan. How do you do it? How did you develop it? How did it work in practice? In a moment here, I'm going to share my screen a little bit. Again, not for PowerPoint, but to show some of the documents that we used in development. One caveat before I share my screen is I am purposely going to go through pretty darn quickly 2 or 3 documents, and to show you, for you to get a feel for our process, not for you to understand all of the information in these documents. So as I go through quickly, don't worry if you're not, the purpose is not for you to read these documents or even for me to fully explain them, just for you to get a sense for the process. So let me share screen here. And Hamza, just give me a heads up if anything doesn't look good on your side of things. But you should just be seeing Chrome screen here. Do you see a Word document in front of you, Hamza?
We got you.
Okay, great. So the first thing we did as our core executive leadership team, we sat in a room, as I'm sure you all have sat in rooms many times, and threw a bunch of things on a whiteboard, and then just transferred all of those notes into a Word document. And this document titled 3-Year HQ Staffing Plan Pre-Draft, this was just a whole bunch of notes where every single function, every department, so our operations department, our staffing department, our finance department, our marketing department, they all mapped out in different ways what they think their individual org chart for their department would be for the next few years. So again, we won't go through this, but this was just a whole bunch of notes that people looked forward for the next 3 years, individual department-wise. So in groups of 2 to 5 folks for us in their departments, to just, what do we want in our departments? And then what are some other possible staffing needs? And then we put all of that together really just in a big Excel document that you see now. And that Excel document, that had all of those needs transferred onto one sheet here. And then we also made space here. You can see for all members of these names here, Dave, Ileana, Kyle, Mindy, Paul. This is just our executive leadership team that gave feedback to all of the different departments of, okay, this seems like I would add this, or this is confusing. And we used all of those initial thoughts, initial feedback to draft this first plan, and what you see on your screen now, this is for staff. So this was our 3-year staffing plan for last year, 2018 to 2020, that we put out to all of our current headquarters staff, so all of our full-time staff, and also all of our current seasonal staff. And we sent this to all of our staff ever. So again, I recognize that all of us on the call have different businesses. Because of our business, because we're seasonal in nature, we have a rotating seasonal staff every year. So our all staff ever list from the last 15 years is a few thousand folks. So we sent this first iteration to all staff that have ever worked for us. And just to go through a little bit, well, actually, sorry, let me stop there in terms of that's kind of development, and then I will go through this document in a little bit more detail of just how it works. But those were kind of how we developed the document, and in a moment here, I will see if you all have any questions. But the last thing I'll say on the development on this is we very purposefully, this is just a pretty simple Excel document, and again, I'll go through the aspects of how it works here in a second, but we purposefully wanted to make this very simple in this first iteration. My guess is a bunch of folks on the call know the acronym MVP, minimally viable product, right? So we wanted to do something that it was just pretty easy for us to iterate on in the future, but initially just get something out quick to just kind of see how it lands with our staff. So those are our thoughts and some of our process on the development. Again, just unmute yourself or wave your hand or throw a message in chat feature for Hamza to notice. If you have questions, would love thoughts or questions that you have on just like our process of developing it before I tell you on how we use it.
Just a reminder, in case we can't see you, you can unmute yourself, and you can also send it through the chat feature.
Great, thank you, Hamza. Awesome, and I love awkward silences, as I've already mentioned. So I will continue to ask, and then as questions come up, please lean into questions. We don't have to wait till the end. So that was the how. There's kind of two parts of how we developed it, and then how we use it or how it works. So I'm going to go through just some aspects of this document just to speak to that second aspect of the how of how it works and how we use it. Wanted to first just spend some time in this initial box that is frozen up. You can see as I go up and down, the yellow boxes here, which are the instructions, those stay present for all of our staff. Again, we sent this to a large audience very purposefully, folks that maybe haven't even worked for us for a number of years. So I think it is important for us to all realize that any system, particularly a new system that we develop, we have to have clear instructions. And if a system is not working, it's first probably our fault. So try to make this really, really simple to use with simple instructions. I'll get back to this I'm interested survey link here in just a moment. Hamza, I did see that one chat came in. Was that a question?
Yeah, so after exec review, how did the list become the final list of approved positions for the opportunity board?
Yeah, really, I mean, I think it speaks a little bit to the minimally viable product that at some point we just said, you know what, this is our timeline where we want to launch this, and what we have on our list right now is what we're going to put out there for folks. And part of the answer to the question, you'll see here in 1 second, column C here in the document, where is this a budgeted need or is this a possible need? There's some things that we didn't know, like we're like, oh, that's a good idea, but it didn't get quote unquote final approval from our exec team. So we put that down potentially as a possible need, not as a confirmed need for our budget for next year. So as we look through this document, we did spend a lot of time as an exec team thinking about the right columns to use. We wanted enough information, but not too much information. We have the position title. We have a start date. This column that I was just mentioning, this budgeted or possible need, this one was really important for us because we wanted to be as transparent as possible to our staff to put it all on the table, but we also didn't want to let staff down. So we put budgeted or possible need, and then it says this in the instructions, but it says whenever there's a black triangle that you see in a box here, if you hover over that box, it gives you a little bit more information. So budgeted, this means that, wow, this is in our budget for next year. Anything could happen, but almost certainly we're going to have this as a need. Whereas the possible box, this is something that we are thinking about doing or we're hopeful to do, but we have not gotten kind of a final confirmation into our budget. And this is just trying to be both transparent, but also set appropriate expectations. Some of these others are just easy logistics of which department, is this a full-time or a part-time position? If it's part-time, how often does how many months will that be, seasonal or temporary through the year? There's some salary information, basic salary information. We try to be really transparent with our compensation scales as well. And then these final two columns here, H and I here, this was really, coming back to my analogy of having the right tools and having the roadmap, what we were really trying to provide for our staff that have all different backgrounds here are, these are the skills that are going to be required and desired for this position. And so, you know, you can look through 1 year in advance or 3 years in advance. I really want to work in the finance department at Avid4 Adventure, and these are the skills I'll need. How can I get that professional development to work towards that? And again, speaking to our first why of hiring from internally, the number one reason we've probably all seen on this call that we hire externally is we don't have the internal candidates with the skills and experience. So these columns are hoping to say, okay, these are the skills and experience, go get them because we want to hire you all. And the last thing the last two things I'll say just on the how this works, and we'll see what questions that you have, is this was, again, we just put this out and we did not put this out as a minimally viable product, and we're hoping for in the future for every single position to have a link to a video. So if I clicked on this link right now, it would link forward to a 1-minute video of a department head, not basically saying the same words that are on the paper here, but in a short video format. This is what this job's all about. This is why you should consider applying or not applying, and these are the skills that you need. So we did put a few examples of videos for each of these jobs. And then the last link up here that, again, stays static as people scroll up and down to look at the different years and different positions. Each year is a different color here over the 3 years. This link, the I'm interested link, this links them to a really, really simple 30-second, maybe a minute, just Google form that people can say, I'm interested, this is my name, here's my information, I'm interested in these positions. And then we would follow up on a weekly basis. We would be just checking in on that survey and following up with folks as needed. So let me stop there, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to do one more interaction here where I'm going to play some music, and the prompt right now is listening to all of that of how we developed it and how it works. I want you to write down your questions about the how, right? So your questions about how we used it and how we use it currently. And again, I'll give you 1 minute to write down your questions as I play music. All right, y'all. Would love to hear from you all. And would love, whatever it works for you, you can throw these questions into the chat, or would love to hear voices on what are your questions, and I can go back to sharing screen if needed here, depending on the question, of the of how did that really work in practice? What questions do you have?
There's a couple here that I could read off for you, Paul.
Great.
So perhaps this is in the notes pre-draft section, but where does it talk about what these different roles do? Or are all these positions just additional people for existing roles that everyone is already familiar with? Is that what the video shows?
It's a little bit of both. We do have some every year seasonal positions for our business that come up that have additional responsibility and leadership that folks that might be a part of our field staff could step into. So those are existing roles that people may be familiar with. But you probably have experienced this as well. You know, even if it's an existing role, if it's in a different part of your business, a different department, people may have some rough familiarization with that position. So we treated even those existing roles, and a lot of the roles on this 3-year staffing position are new role because of growth needed. So we treat all of them as if trying to provide as much information as possible. And the video shows that, and also those 2 columns of what skills are needed. You know, if we took some more time and looked at those bulleted lists, they dive into, they try to explain, this is a little bit about what the job is. We very purposely didn't want to provide full job descriptions because we wanted this to be kind of a quick hit for folks. But with the bullet list of needs and desired needs, with the video, our hope would be good enough to explain what the positions were.
Great. Another question is, what kind of professional development processes does Avid4 Adventure have in place to help internal candidates build their skills for a new position?
It's a great question. Right at the beginning of this, of our time together, I mentioned that this 3-year staffing plan was just one aspect of developing our future pipeline. We do a couple of other things. We have something called a leadership and management practicum that is an application for all current staff members that they can apply into, and it's a 3-month program that for us unfolds in the winter and spring, where people get professional development across all aspects of our business, trying to get them some of the skills needed to plug into almost any role that we might have, to give them kind of more of a breadth of knowledge about our business across all of our departments. So that's one thing that we do. And then we do internal webinars and internal professional development across the different departments that people can apply into. That's pretty much the limit of our scope right now. And I love your question. It's a current question around our table right now that we're hoping to add in more opportunities and more in-person classroom sessions to have specific professional development to tie to these future needs.
Right.
And we've also, one last thing I'll say on that, we've also talked about, and this comes back to the budgeting of this as well, of how can we budget to support professional development for the positions that we need with sources outside of Avid. So how can, if somebody clicks on the I'm interested link, and we say, yeah, I want to invest in this person, but they don't have the skills needed for this particular job that they're interested in, how can I provide dollars for them to go elsewhere to get those skills and experience? So it's still in progress for us, for sure.
Great. How often do you get back to the table to update and communicate the expected roles?
Once a year on a large front. I would caveat on that, this is all very new for us as well. So we're only in our 2nd iteration of this.
The next question is similar in that, like, how often do you edit this document, and then how do you actually share it with your staff?
Yeah, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in the next section of the actual presentation, where I'll talk about just the hard parts for us. So I'll punt it a little bit to that. But we shared this we communicate a lot via email with our staff, and we have an internal kind of an intranet portal, staff portal, and those were the two main mechanisms where we share just through email and internal communications, and just communications that our staff were used to. And in terms of the revisiting, and I also see there's a question, anything that you would do differently. I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to go back to this PowerPoint. I actually only have one more slide to share, and I think that the question, what would we do differently, is talks to this about what are the hard parts, and I'm gonna spend about 5 minutes or so here, and then we'll have some time for wrap up and final questions here. But before I talk about our hard parts, I wanted to lean in on some vulnerability right here a little bit. And, HAMSA and Small Giants, I'm so grateful that they asked us to join this conversation and share some of our learning, some of the things that we're doing really well as an organization to build our bench. And the vulnerable part is this 3-year staffing plan. Basically, the last 25 minutes of what I showed you, it's not working really well for us. We've had some success, and some of the positions that are on that 3-year staffing plan that were on there for 2019, we were able to hire internally, and some other positions we weren't. And so the vulnerable piece is I come to you as somebody who's trying this out, as an organization who's trying this out, and is seeing some success, and also, in all truth, is seeing some failure with this as well. So I want to be honest that I don't have all of the right answers, and we have had some significant hard parts that I think should inform all of our conversations as we keep trying to get better at these conversations. So the hard parts here, obviously it's hard to predict the future, but in addition to that, these were the 3 main biggest challenge areas that we're still dealing with. This first one, ownership. I took this on, and I said, I'm going to lead this charge. And as you can imagine, this was a huge endeavor for all of our departments. All of our departments I asked to predict future and tie to their individual budgets, and try and with rapid growth that we continue to have, it's just, and I'm sure you all are in different ways having as well, it's really hard for one person to own such a big conversation like that. And as it says here, I probably, as the CEO, shouldn't have been that person. So that was a failure point for us. That in terms of what I would do differently, that's one thing I would do differently. The user-friendly nature, you probably saw that Excel document. For us, it was I thought it was easy, and it was definitely a minimally viable product to just get out there. And we think that in these first attempts, it's just not great user experience. Most of our staff that we're talking to about these future opportunities are in their mid-20s and used to much flashier user experiences. So another thing I would do differently, and we're currently in development to do differently, is how to make this just kind of a flashier, potentially even gamified aspect of this. And the third thing that was just stood out as hard for us and continues to be hard is how do we respond? And I spoke to this a little bit in terms of we want to be transparent, but we want to set appropriate expectations. And fundamentally, when we're communicating with a lot of folks about a lot of possible roles and things that might be changing, it is challenging to respond when things don't work out, when we do hire externally, and yet outwardly we transparently said our biggest goal is to hire internally. So how do you respond to that, and how do you keep engagement and keep folks really wanting to be a part of this continued process? I'm going to stop there, and before I get to just kind of final questions and some wrap up and talk about moving forward from here, Hamza, have there been other questions that have come up around this about the how or struggles that we've had, or folks can put into the chat questions about these hard parts and the vulnerable part of this?
See real quickly. I guess there was one earlier on. How have you been able to analyze the effectiveness of your how? I know you said it's still in the early stages and you're still sort of measuring, but anything else you want to add?
Yes, some of it has been anecdotal, that, folks that, so the anecdotal part of it is, as I talk to staff and as my directors and my managers talk to staff, we've heard overwhelmingly people just a ton of gratitude of saying, wow, that was awesome. I didn't fill out the survey. I wasn't interested in those positions. My life is going a different direction, but thank you for sharing, and thank you for letting us know that has not been a part of other jobs I've had. So part of the success has been anecdotal that way. Part of the success is the number of folks who filled out that I'm interested survey, just that simple Google form. It was a big response, and it really was. It was fun to see that the response came from all sorts of staff. So we had people fill out that survey who were currently in full-time roles that were interested in other roles. We had folks that were currently in seasonal roles for us, and then we had a lot of folks fill out that survey that had worked for us years in the past. So we felt that it was appropriate reach across all different kinds of our staff. And then the last thing I'll say in terms of measuring success is looking at the positions that we did hire for over this past year, 2019, how many were internal and how many were external. And I would say on that metric, as I already mentioned, I think we were so-so on success. So before I get to some final thoughts and final questions from you all, either now or later, I want to spend just a couple minutes on the now what of how you all can use this moving forward, and as I mentioned, how we're going to be using this moving forward. Hamza and Rachel at Small Giants, they asked me in advance of this presentation, Paul, can you share all of those resources, those spreadsheets that you had and the forms, and I said no. I said I don't want to share them, and it's not because I don't want to share them because they're proprietary or anything like that. I said no because something like this concept of looking at 3 years of your business and how you'll grow and what needs you'll have, and a question that came up: how did we communicate? We chose to communicate one method, but how you should communicate and how you should put it together as a document, it is just so not plug and play. We all have such individual cultures and individual staffings. We have a big seasonal staff. You all might have a staff that is still asking that same question. I want more responsibility. How do I get that? But you just have more full-time staff where you can move around to different departments, perhaps, right? So I said no to sharing of those specific resources because in terms of the now what, how to use this, my hope is that over the last 45 minutes, you've gotten one or two ideas, and you've taken away just some big principal ideas and then some micro thoughts of, oh, that was interesting how Avid did that, or what Paul said about that. And then you can take those nuggets of learning, those nuggets of thoughts, and the big principal ideas on the why behind this, and then plug this into what makes sense for you. So I don't think it makes sense to share individual resources. Obviously, on the screen right now is my email, and Hamza and Rachel can share that out with you all. But what I do want to make sure that you all know is I'm happy to be a resource to talk through any of the specific aspects of the presentation today, or if it does make sense, if our businesses are pretty aligned, I'm happy to share that Excel spreadsheet that we created, or any of those documents, if that makes sense for you. So we have just a few minutes left here, and I did wanted to stop and just see what questions folks have, about something I said 45 minutes ago, about something I just said in the last 2 minutes, or just a note that you wrote down, anything else that I could be of service to you all right now. Let's take a few minutes to get questions that come in via chat, or again, feel free to unmute yourself and get your voice heard.
Great. There was one more that came through. Sounds like hiring the right interns or part-time staff is critical to your longer-term staffing success. So how are you looking at those candidates to hire for the long term?
I might need a little bit of clarification when they're saying with interns, perhaps they're meaning our seasonal staff who are our instructor staff. I'm gonna answer as if you meant that, and if I'm misreading the question, whoever asked that question, please correct me. But really, we have a set of core values, and for us, we have 8 core values. When we look to hire someone, particularly someone coming brand new into our organization, we look to be really transparent with our core values and making sure that someone who's coming to work for us is on board with those core values. And really, as an initial instructor, we can train to almost everything else in terms of hard skills and experiences that they need to engage with kids, engage with other staff members. But being aligned with our core values, we need to make sure that is happening from the get-go.
Any other questions from the crowd? Okay.
Right on. Well, my hope was for 45 to 50 minutes and to give all of you back just a little bit of time. I know you had an hour on your schedule, so I'm giving you back 7 minutes of time. And I know I'll turn it over to Hamza here in just a second. I know she has some closing thoughts. Last thing that I will say is just I have a ton of gratitude for just sharing space with you all today. And gratitude for the entire Small Giants community, just to be a part of it, and excited to hear from you in the future, all of you in the future, be a resource for you, and also be a student of yours in the future to learn from all the great work that you all do. So thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, well that's it for this one. Check out more Fishbowls exclusively for the Small Giants community at smallgiants.org.